Please be seated. The court is now back in session, and the floor is given to the defense team for Noon Chi to put questions to this witness. You may proceed. Sonarun, good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honors, and good afternoon, Mr. Lev Lam. My name is Sonarun, Defense Counsel for Noon Chi. I have some questions to put to you this afternoon, and my colleague will have some more questions for you. First, and I would like to refer to your written record of interview with the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges. You stated before the investigators that in the Dam Rainsrod prison, there were about 20 to 30 prisoners, as you stated this morning. Is this correct? Answer, yes, it is. President, the prosecutor, you may proceed.
Mr. President, I don't know whether there was a problem with the translation, but it sounded like the subject of this question was the Dam Rainsrod prison, which is not a issue within the scope of the current trial, not a matter that I asked Quincy, the witness, testified about this morning. So I don't know if there was a problem in the translation, but questions about the Dam Rainsrod prison, which came into existence in early 1976, are outside the scope of this trial, and we would object.
Counsel, this morning the prosecutor and the civil parties counsel spent half a day to speak about the Dam Rainsrod prison, and it is also reflected in the written record of the interview with the OCIJ, and you said it is out of the scope. That is incorrect.
Mr. President, that is simply incorrect. If counsel would read the interview, you'll see that these executions took place in the months after 17 April 1975. The prison came into existence in 1976. The only connection is that the location of the execution site was, at one point the witness identified in his interview that it was 500 meters from the future location of the prison. That is the only connection between these two. But the testimony this witness gave this morning had nothing to do with the prison itself, which didn't come into existence until early 1976.
President, Counsel, your questions should be related to the fact put before this chamber. The fact should link to the killing site near the Chirok Songkai village. And the killing was that of the 17 April people who were the former soldiers and the public servants of the previous regime. And that is the purpose of today's testimony and questioning. Council. Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me first to ask the witness about the prison, and then I will move on to that killing site, if I can do so, because his testimony also reflects in the written record of the interview. President, not all the facts within that written record of interview are subject to the questioning today. Our focus today is on the policy toward the 17 April people that is based on the request made by the prosecution, and we only focus on certain facts, not the entire written record of the interview by this witness before the investigators of the OCIJ, because that written record of interview is more general and it covers all the events within the period of democratic Cambodia. Council, anyway, I do not understand this clarification, but I will hand the floor over to my international colleague.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Council. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I would like to start asking you questions, Mr. Witness, about the arrival of people from Phnom Penh and from Kampong Chhnam. You said earlier there were about 200, 300 families coming. These 200 to 300 families, did they come all at once? Did they come in various days? Do you remember when you first saw them, and whether when you saw them they were all there at the same time?
I saw them already come to that area, but I did not know whether later on they or more had come. I saw them gathered under the shade of the trees.
But did you see people arrive from Phnom Penh or from other cities, for instance in May 1975 or June 1975?
At that time, evacuees from Phnom Penh were mixed together with those evacuated from Kampong Chhnam, and we could not identify who was who.
I just want to be absolutely clear. When you speak about these people, you didn't actually see them arrive, you just saw them all together in the weeks after 17 April 75. Would that be correct?
Yes, I saw them at a village.
But I still want to be absolutely clear, you didn't see in the weeks or months later new people arriving from cities like Kampong Chhnam or Phnom Penh.
After that, I did not see more came.
All right. Did you speak yourself to any of these people belonging to the 200, 300 families when they were kept together?
Since I did not know them, I did not speak to them or make a joke with them.
How did you know then that they came from Phnom Penh or from Kampong Chnam?
I saw them, and actually some of them came through my house. I did not ask them much, but my father told me that they came from Kampong Chnang.
What do you mean when you say some of them came through my house?
Some evacuees came and stayed under the house of under my house because they did not have anywhere to go. So we allowed them to stay under the house.
And did the same happen to other people from this group? Did they stay close by or under the houses of other people in the village?
Others stayed at other houses within the village. There were 150 houses within my village. So those people would stay at those houses or they stayed under the trees.
So would it be fair to say that once those 200 to 300 families arrived, they were spread out in the various houses of the village? And if yes, can you tell us how long they stayed in those houses in the village?
That is correct. They stayed for 1 week, and then some of them disappeared and some remained.
Is it correct for me to say, Mr. Witness, that none of these people who had arrived from Phnom Penh or Kampong Chnam were guarded or were kept in one location?
That is correct. They were spread within the village.
Do you remember how many people who had arrived from Phnom Penh or Kampong Chnam were in your house? How many people, men, women or children, were living in or around your house?
Near my house there were a few families, and a bit further from my house there were several more families, but I could not tell you how many families all together because there were many of them within the village. It was crowded.
Now, if you're saying a few families stayed in my house, and earlier this morning you said the family has about 5 to 6 people, would it be fair to say that in your house between 15 and 20 people were staying? People that had just arrived from Phnom Penh or Kampong Chhnam?
I knew that those who came to stay near my house were from Kampong Chhnang. As for those from Phnom Penh, they were at other houses.
Now, these people were staying at your house for a while. Didn't you speak to them at all? Didn't you make a little chat with them? Talk to them about their background, their former jobs, etc.?
I did not really speak to them much. I, of course, saw their faces. I saw them at my house, and then I left because I did not always stay at home.
Now let me move on a little bit in time. This morning, Mr. Witness, you testified that you at one point learned that the people who had just arrived from Phnom Penh or Kampong Chhnam had to write their biography. Do you remember when this news was conveyed to the people that were living in your house, that they had to write their biography?
They made their biography, but I did not know much about that as I, at the time, was at the office.
But could you explain to us how that went in practice? All those people were scattered around in the 150 houses. How were they informed? How did they know that at one point in time they were supposed to write their biography? How was the news brought to them?
They walked around getting biography from those people, and it was the village chief who did that.
Yes, but how did the village chief do that? Did he knock on the door? Did he ask who is from Phnom Penh and Kampong Chhnam, please raise their hand and come with me? How did that go?
They went from one house to the next and asked where those people came from. And if they came from Kampong Chhnang, they would say they came from Kampong Chhnang. And if they came from Phnom Penh, then they would say they came from Phnom Penh.
Do you know if there were also people who said that they were from the village, but in fact were from Kampong Chhnam or from Phnom Penh?
At that time, those people were asked by the village chief, and the village chief advised them if they came from Kampong Chhnang, they should say they came from Kampong Chhnang. or if those who came from Phnom Penh should say so.
What else did the village chief tell them? I mean, what did he ask them to do except writing where they are from? Which instructions did he give to, for instance, the people that were in your house?
I did not know the details of other points within the instruction, as I was not with the village chief.
Maybe, but you were at least with the people who were living in your house. Didn't they tell you which instructions they got or had received in respect of their biography?
They wrote their biography that they were rice farmers. And in fact, just to tell you, those people who came to live under my house, they are still living today, and they are still living in Kampong Chhnang.
Do you remember where they were supposed to write their biographies? Did they write their biographies while in your home, or did they write it outside? Did they have to go to a place to write it? Do you remember that?
So they walked from one house to another, and later on they were all called to a meeting at the village chief's house, and that's where they wrote their biographies there. That is at the village chief's house.
All 700 people at the same time?
Of course, not everyone at the same time. There could be 30 families at one time or 40 families at one time. And after that group concluded, then another group would go.
But did you actually see that yourself? That a group of 30 people would assemble at the house of the village chief?
I saw some of them, but I did not actually join that meeting. I only saw them, and then I walked away.
But is it your testimony that the people who were living in your house had written in their biography that they were rice farmers?
Yes, those people who lived under my house were rice farmers, and some of other families who were nearby or at other houses, they were also rice farmers.
You testified earlier that you didn't have that you were not allowed any access to any of those biographies being written. What you know, what was written, is that only something that you heard from the people who were living in your house?
please repeat your question?
You have testified earlier that you didn't have any access to the biographies once they were written. The fact that the people who were living in your house called themselves rice farmers, is that something they told you after they were done?
Regarding the making of a biography, after they came back from making their biography, they did not tell me, but they told my mother. And they told my mother that they wrote on their biography that they were rice farmers.
Do you know how the village chief made sure that the people who wrote their biography were accurate? How did he check whether, for instance, the people who were living in your house were in fact rice farmers from Kampong Chnam?
Response. This could be verified through means of farming, for example, whether they had possessed some cattle, and also they also analyzed their peasants' background, how they lived their life to identify them as peasants.
But do you know how the village chief or others did that in practice? If somebody wrote down that he had 2 cows in Kampong Chnam, how did the village chief or somebody else verify that? How could he do that?
Response. I don't know about this, but the information in the biographies could be significantly enough for someone to identify the author of the biography, but I cannot tell whether the information is somehow accurate or not.
But were you never told by anybody how the biographies were verified? Did somebody ever ask you to verify a biography?
Response. I was told to verify the information in the biography itself, and there is no other ways we can check other than relying heavily on the content of each biography, and that if people say they were peasants, they would be put in peasants group, and if they said they were soldiers, then they would also be placed in the soldier group.
So what you're saying is that if the soldier wrote down in his biography that he was in fact a rice farmer, he turned out lucky, and the other one who told the truth was unlucky? Is that what you're saying?
The President. Witness, can you please hold on, and co-prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Mr. President, I think these questions are starting to ask the witness to speculate and provide conclusions about who was lucky and who was not, and whether or not some people were inaccurate in their biographies. I think he's asking the witness to speculate at this point.
Mr. President, that is the strangest objection I've heard in a long time. We're reaching the core of the importance of this witness. Was there a policy to target law and order officials or soldiers? So the selection, the way these people were selected is of crucial importance for ascertaining the truth in this matter. So any question about his knowledge of selection process is vital information, especially in the light of the testimony that the persons, I will call them unlucky, were in fact executed. So I really cannot place the objection of the prosecution.
Mr. President, I have no objection if he wants to ask factual questions about the process, but he's not asking a factual question. He's asking the witness to speculate on what may have happened if someone concealed information in their biography, whether they were lucky or unlucky. That's not a factual question related to the selection process.
The President, the objection by Mr. Co-Prosecutor is sustained. Witness is now directed not to respond to the question that solicits a speculative response. Counsel is now advised to rephrase the question.
I will, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, what can you say to us about the verification process in general of these biographies? Has anybody ever asked you to follow up on the content of a biography?
Response: No, I was never asked to follow up this because I had different duty, and other people would be entitled to do this instead of me.
Do you know whether in those weeks after 17 April anybody was ever accused of not writing the truth in his or her biography?
Response: There was no such case because people had to write down the truth. Because the moment before a person started to write his or her own biography, he or she was already told that the content of the biography must be truthful, otherwise they should not write it.
True, but were you never part of a discussion in which mechanisms were discussed to find the people who maybe did not speak the truth in their biographies?
Response: At that time there was no such system, and that no one was tasked other than the cadre of the village to do this. Other people would not be asked to follow up on this content of the biography.
What do you know, Mr. Witness, about the division or the distinction in two groups, enemies and capitalists on the one hand, and other people on the other hand. How did, for instance, Sron decide on the basis of a biography who was a capitalist and who wasn't?
Response: I don't know about this.
Do you know how Sron or others decided on the basis of a biography that somebody was a Lon Nol official? What is a Lon Nol official? Do you know that?
Response: No, I don't.
Do you know how Sron or others decided on, after reading the biographies, that somebody was an enemy?
Response: I don't know.
Do you know how Sron, Nan or others made sure that everybody who had come from Phnom Penh or Kampong Chhnai handed in a biography? Did they do a count, a head count, for instance?
Response: I don't know.
Do you know if there was a certain format, for instance, what's the word? A little piece of paper people had to write it down? Was it a little booklet that people had to write down their biography? Do you know how that was done?
Response: Normally, the papers that they used for writing the biographies could have been nothing other than the simple sheets from students writing books. There were no such A4 paper as we do have these days.
Mr. Witness, please do not say normally. You know something or you don't know something. So I'm not interested how things could have been done normally. My question is what you know as to what form of paper or booklet or whatever people were supposed to write in their biographies.
Response: I know for sure that these papers were the sheets from the pages of the writing books, and the small pieces of papers that they used for writing biography. That's what I knew.
Mr. Witness, do you know which personal details a person was supposed to write down? Names of father and mother, for instance, how many children, those kind of things. Do you know anything about that?
Response: I do not know the detailed information of how a biography should be written because I was nowhere nearby to know all about this.
Let's move on to the next phase, Mr. Witness. Let's assume for a moment that all these people wrote their biographies. They went home, some of them went to your house. What happened then?
Response. After the biographies had been written, these people would be asked to return home, and those who wrote in their biographies that they were soldiers then would be taken to other locations.
How do you know that? Have you heard that? Have you seen that? Did somebody go around in the village and say everybody who wrote down soldier should come? How did that go?
Response. I heard from other people about how biography should be written, what should be put in such biography, and I heard about this from others.
I don't understand completely, Mr. Wood. It's as I understand from your testimony, you're living in a small village, 150 houses. Please try to remember well. Have you not heard anybody say or see anybody calling for the people who said in their biographies that they had been Lon Nol soldiers?
Response. Well, I heard people say about this because under my house, my mother was told about the biographies, and that they told her that some of them were taken somewhere that she never knew where they could be taken to.
Have you actually seen with your own eyes that people went to a place and told whoever that they were Lon Nol soldiers?
Response. No, I don't know about this.
And what about former officials of the Lon Nol regime? How were they informed that they had to go to a certain place?
Response. Regarding the former Lon Nol officials, people would just say that now at this particular location it was too crowded. Then a group of them or some of them will need to be transported or transferred to other location, the location that they were taken to and would never be seen again.
Do you remember whether there was a discussion about the words Lon Nol officials? What is a Lon Nol official? Who would qualify to be a Lon Nol official? Did you hear any discussions about that?
Response. I don't know about this.
Yet you speak about Lon Nol officials. What do you mean when you speak about Lon Nol officials?
Response. Local officials here refer to soldiers, local soldiers. That's what I understand.
So are you saying now it's only former Lon Nol military who had to assemble at some point after their biographies had been checked and verified? Is that correct?
Response. The only thing I know about this is that after the biographies were obtained, then people could identify whether those were Lon Nol soldiers or not. That's what I was told.
Do you know how many soldiers had actually written down that they were soldiers in their biography? How many had to assemble at one point? Do you know?
Response. No, I don't.
Do you know if anybody ever asked them anything about their rank, about which unit they were from, those kind of questions?
Response. I knew from the commune, rather the village chief.
But did he tell you how he knew that they were in fact soldiers?
Response. I don't know where he could learn this information from, but to me, only cadres could have such information.
I'm trying to find out, Mr. Witness, how you know that other cadres knew that these people were in fact Lon Nol soldiers. How did people verify that these people were in fact had been in fact Lon Nol soldiers?
Response. I'm afraid I don't know fully about this, in particular whether these people could have been soldiers or civilians.
Now, at one point in time, there was a group gathered together. And if I understand it correctly, you use the word trickery in respect of this group. Did I understand it correctly?
Response. Yes, it is correct.
Could you please explain again how this group, of which you do not know who they are, but how were they tricked to leave their respective houses where they were staying to, I presume, a central place? Could you say something about the trickery?
Response. The trickery would include, for example, like when people told them that living in this area you would face food difficulty, and that only moving elsewhere that you would have more food or plenty of food, and this is the way they convinced them or tricked them to leave one place to another.
But how did they do the convincing or the trickery? Did they tell that to them face to face, or did they tell that at a bigger meeting? How did they convince these people?
Response. They did this right in front of the group of these people. For example, they would just say, look, we had no more rice to eat. If we remained in the same location, we would not have food. So it's better to leave this place for another location to get more food.
Now you have to explain that to me, Mr. Witness, because that I don't understand. You first have to use the trickery to get the group together. And once the group is together, you can maybe trick them into something. But how did they get the group together? Do you know that?
Response. I'm afraid I don't know how people could be gathered or tricked to come together.
So is your testimony now that there was at one point in time a group of whom you had no idea who they were and no idea how they had come to this place? Is that what you're saying now?
The President, Mr. Witness, could you please hold on, and Mr. Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to give counsel an opportunity to cross-examine. At the same time, his questioning has become extremely repetitive and circular. The witness has answered his questions, which he's probably asked 6 times the same question at various points to the best of his ability. And counsel is also now engaged in mischaracterizing the witness's testimony. The witness did not say they had no idea who these people are. The witness simply, in response to questions about verification, said he didn't know what was done or how verification was that. Counsel is misstating the testimony, asking repetitive questions, and I think this last question is repetitive and objectionable.
With all due respect, Mr. President, that's an outrageous objection. There has been not one single repetitive question, trying to find out what he knows about the existence of the group, who were there, how they were assembled. Obviously, the witness doesn't have any idea, but that's the purpose of this cross-examination.
And I would add, Mr. President, it's inappropriate for counsel to be making submissions in front of this witness, highly inappropriate, and I would ask that he cease making comments.
Please say the same thing to your colleague, Mr. Prosecutor, when he was questioning the wife of Kyo Sampang. He did the same thing.
President. Defense Counsel, please move on to another question. We already have all the grounds for our deliberation. And when you raise the approach of putting question by the other party to give some point, I think you keep repeating that same point. And of course, the bench will discuss on all those relevant matters and make an assessment on the probative value of the evidence, and there is no need for you to raise at the same point again and again.
Very well, Mr. President. So, Mr. Witness, this group of allegedly Lone Nol soldiers is assembled at some point. Do you remember exactly when this was? How many weeks after 17 April?
After the 17th April, they came to the village, and later on they left the village and did not know where they were relocated to, because a portion of them left the village.
Where to?
I already said they left the village and I did not know where they went to.
Now, this group of people that you were speaking about, is that the same group of people, I believe you said 70, who were taken in groups of 10 to a specific location?
No, that was a separate group. This morning I spoke about a group whom I was asked to take them, and that is take them to another village as they were to be relocated, and there were only 2 or 3 families within that group. And when you referred to another group, I didn't know because they left the village.
Now I'm losing you, Mr. Witness. You this morning you were speaking about a group of people, I think 70. And you were ordered to bring 10 of these people from one location to another location. Who were these people?
President, witness, please wait the prosecution and you may proceed.
Mr. President, our objection is that he's misstating the testimony of this witness. The witness described an incident where he took 20 people up to the execution site. 10 of them were then tied up and taken away. And I don't know whether counsel has forgotten the testimony or whether he's simply trying to mislead or confuse the witness. But his questions should be clear. And if he's referring to this incident, it was 20 people that he took up there, 10 of whom were tied up and taken away.
I object to the word execution site, Mr. President, because that is something that we are trying to establish here. Let me rephrase, Mr. Witness. At one point, you were bringing 10 people from place A to place B. Who were these people?
Those people were a group of people who were referred to in Khmer as a Svai Tran.
Could you help me and explain to me what that means?
Through my knowledge, Svai Tran from the Lono regime referred to the commune militia group.
Now, how did you know, or how do you know that these 10 people were who you said they were? Did you speak to them? Did you talk to them before you brought them?
The village chief told me to transport the 2 or 3 families, as they were all the Svai Tran people, and that they would be transported to be relocated in another village.
But did the village chief tell you how he knew what the background was of these 2 or 3 families?
I was told by the village chief they were the commune militia group called Svai Tran, and that they would be relocated to another village.
And did he tell you that before they were tied, during that they were tied, or afterwards?
When they first were taken, they were not tied, as some of them actually sat on the ox carts. Only when they arrived at that location, they were tied up.
So when they arrived at that location, was that the location you spoke earlier about, where you stayed about 15 minutes?
Yes. After I took them there, they were received by the district soldiers at that location.
And that was the location that you said earlier about, that you didn't see any grave pits. Is that correct?
I did not go to where the grave pits were. I was told by the soldiers to stay put in one place and not to wander around. And then they took those people away. And that's it.
And after 15 minutes, you went back to where you came from. Is that correct?
Then I returned to the Sangkai village.
Were these the only 10 people that you took to that particular place that you have been just describing? These are the only 10 people who you brought there?
President, witness, please wait. The prosecution, you may proceed.
I'm not sure whether counsel is deliberately doing this, but he continues to misstate this witness's evidence. It was 20 people he took up there, 10 of whom were tied. I don't know why counsel keeps misstating the testimony of the witness, but the question is improper when he continues to misstate the record.
Fine. These 20 people, were those the only 20 people that you brought to that specific location, Mr. Witness?
The group that I took there were 20 people, and there were about 5 children who went along with their parents.
When you left these 20 people at that place, no, let me rephrase. When you left after 15 minutes, that place, were these 20 people still standing there?
They were still at that location when I left.
And if
President, the time is appropriate for a short break. We will take a 20-minute break and return at 3 p.m. Court officer, could you assist the witness during the break and have him return to the courtroom at 3 p.m.?